This is Radio Cairo. We're coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is at the control. And today we have a very special guest. His Excellency Ambassador Eric Husem, the Ambassador of Norway to Egypt. He was so kind enough to come to our studio today and talk about his beloved country, Norway, a country that's definitely forms a lot of imagination of Egyptians, and we're going to talk and get into more knowledge about Norway. But first we have to talk about His Excellency Ambassador Eric Husem, who is a very experienced diplomat who served, has a degree in political science and a master's degree in political science from Oslo University, served his country in the Foreign Service and the Ministry of first Ministry of Defense and then the Ministry of Foreign Service, and he worked in the permanent missions of Norway, the embassies in Damascus and in Baghdad, and now he's the current ambassador in Cairo. Definitely, it's a great pleasure and honor. Thank you very much, sir, for having the time to come to our program. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amr. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a great honor, sir. Norway, for our listeners, is a country that has a total area of about 385,000 square kilometers, and a population of 5.4 million people. The country shares a long eastern border with Sweden. It's bordered by Finland and Russia to the north, east, and Skagerrak Strait to the south, on the other side of which is Denmark and the United Kingdom. So European, yet so Scandinavian, if we may use the expression. So how much geography affected the country, sir?
So I think it affected the country a lot. As you say, it has a very long coastline. So we're a people of fishermen and sailors. You know, Norway is a big maritime country. A lot of history, being sailors all the way back to the Viking era. From the beginning of let's say the Viking era, where farmers, people in Norway were seeking for other opportunities, because you may have looked at the map and seen that Norway is a very mountainous country. There aren't great areas of arable land. So back then, it was difficult to find arable land and difficult to get a living. So more and more people sought adventures outside of the country, and they sailed Viking, as they used to call it back then, and they sailed west, because that's most of our coast is facing west. So being a maritime country and also having this big outlook towards the west, towards the United Kingdom and the United States, has formed our history until today. I think, being a country outside of EU, but NATO, one of the founding states of nations of NATO alliance, with very strong ties to the United Kingdom and the United States, has been sort of a very strong feature of our history. And as you say, maybe even stronger than our ties to continental Europe, although we've had very strong ties there as well. But we've always been more westward looking.
But you're members of the EU, right, sir?
No, we are not members of the EU.
Really?
So we are one of the few states in Europe left outside. We had two referendums, one in 1972 and one in 1994, where a small majority voted against joining the EU, mostly to, I think it was mostly to protect our fisheries and our agricultural sector, which, as I said, is very small. So we would have faced a very fierce competition from the continent. But it was also an issue of independence. I think we have a short history of independance. We gained our independence in 1905.
Yes.
So I think that's still very strong element of Norwegian identity, which still means today that the thought of having let's say another power or another organization like the EU decide Norwegian policy from Brussels is something that, well, at least half the population still have qualms against. I must say, personally, I voted for the EU in '94, and I would vote again for the EU. But that's another discussion we can take later. But yes, geography, not just a very long coastline, but also very mountainous, very very different from the other two main powers in Scandinavia, Denmark and Sweden. You know, they have much more varied topography. They were much more like the rest of the continental Europe during the Middle Ages. They had big castles, they had knights, they had strong armies and kings. Norway was, you know, much weaker, much more difficult to reign and to unite in a kingdom. So I think our geography has definitely
and this puts you, I mean,
identified us
with sandwiched between two countries that had certain upper hand, if we use the expression,
absolutely,
in controlling Norway, and this we mean Sweden and Denmark. There was almost what we can call a forced union between Norway, which the Norwegians were not that fond of. And that's why in the 19th century there was a big immigration of Norwegians going west, as you have said, to the United States, and therefore they are forming a big Norwegian community in diaspora, if we use the expression. Of course, they lost the ties through 2 centuries now, but definitely we can still see Norwegian-like people in the United States, and with Norwegian names or Norwegian built, if we use the expression, of being tall and this type of features that is known for the Norwegians and Scandinavians in general. So, talking about this in particular, the only escape this 400-year night with Denmark, for example, or the later on the Swedish forced union, still lingers in the hearts and the minds of Norwegian. Do you think so?
I mean, it doesn't linger in the way that we harbor any bitterness or anger towards our neighbors. On the contrary, we consider the Swedes and the Danes as our brothers and sisters.
Of course, and cousins,
but over the years, I mean, over many centuries, we were in and you said almost in a forced union. It wasn't almost; it was a forced union, definitely. Just a brief historical context. In 1348, a ship arrived to Bergen on one of the biggest commercial cities on the west coast with the Black Plague. Quickly spread and decimated Norway, decimated the entire elite. So Norway in the early 13 and 1400s was very weak. The population had halved at least. So there was no elite left in Norway. So it was the Danish king together with the Swedish monarchy. There was a trilateral union, the Kalmar Union, but Norway was definitely the weakest, and we were forced into that union. Eventually, the Swedes pulled out, and the Danes took over. It was to start with a sort of a union between equals, between quotation marks, two kingdoms, because Norway had been a kingdom in the early Viking ages, but eventually the Danes took over. They introduced dictatorial leadership through their king. Yes, it has been referred to in the history books as the 400-year night, because we were under Danish tutelage, occupation, if you like. On the other hand, I think researchers will say today that Norway thrived, and Norway had a lot of success also under the Danish stewardship, I guess, and eventually, this notion of independence and a new political class grew out of that. So I think it's not history is not black and white. It was there were some good things about being in a union with Sweden and Denmark. Denmark lost the Napoleonic War, Sweden was on the winning side. They were awarded Norway as a prize.
Although their king was Bernadotte, sorry, and he is originally a marshal of Napoleon Bonaparte. This is really mesmerizing history.
I know it's complicated and it's a bit
it's
ironic.
Really complicated.
It's
like
a bit
what
ironic.
You see on Facebook, it's complicated. You talk about relationship.
Definitely. But in 1814, when Napoleon lost and Denmark lost with him, they had to give away one of their prizes, Norway, to Sweden.
To an ex-marshal.
Yeah, and at that point there was a political class in Norway that rebelled against this notion of being just handed over to a new country, to a new king. So they came together in 1814. They wrote a constitution for Norway, which was very much inspired by the French and the American Constitution, which, by the way, is the second oldest constitution still in use today in the world. And at that time also a very radical and very liberal constitution, which is also maybe a reaction to the autocratic and dictatorial stewardship of or tutelage of the Danish king in Copenhagen before, so a reaction to that. But then the Swedes claimed their prize. They mounted a short war against Norway, but the Swedish king Karl Johan, he was actually, I guess, a bit modern-minded, and he agreed to let Norway have its internal independence. So he wanted to have a sort of a union of equals between Norway and Sweden from 1814 to 1905. So we were under a Swedish king. Foreign policy was determined by Sweden, but everything internally, domestically, was run by a Norwegian parliament, by a Norwegian government. The Norwegian government was not always listened to in Stockholm, granted, but still it was, there was the first trappings of an independent country grew out of 1814. And the Swedes let us sort of thrive and develop our own identity. And then in 1905, when we had a very large merchant fleet,
yes.
And we felt that Swedish consulates abroad were not advancing our interests, Norwegian interests. We broke with Sweden by saying that we needed our own diplomatic missions, our own consulates. And fortunately, the Swedish king at that time did not want a war with Sweden, and there was some very good diplomatic handling on both sides of the border, which meant that we had an amicable break, an amicable divorce, and we've been best friends ever since. Also with the Danes.
Well, this makes it a very interesting story. It all started with a ship carrying plagued people, and when you talk about that, this was
1348.
1348, the same year that has seen here in Egypt the Black Plague reaching it and swarming part of the entire Egyptian population, especially the Cairene population. And the Sultan at that time, Sultan Hassan, used a lot of funds that he has got from the people who died without inheritors to build his grand mosque, Sultan Hassan Mosque. Wow. Because instead of building a palace, he used this money, which was a huge amount of money, to build this mosque, knowing that there were no more people to live. This is really very interesting. How
absolutely, yes.
This was the first of a lot of plagues really that happened through the world. But the climax was 1347, and even the plagues that came about, they were now numbered maybe to 10 to 12 times.
Right.
Egypt and the rest of Europe have seen these black plagues, but the hardest of them all was 1347. I totally agree with you, and this has really changed the whole world. We have talked about this, how Norway became an independent state and how relations went on, and therefore we talk about a man who had some effect, and a very important positive effect, and that this is Christian Michelsen, a shipping magnate and a statesman, a prime minister of Norway from 1905 to 1907, played a central role, as you have mentioned, in the separation of Norway from Sweden on June 19, 1905. A national referendum confirmed the people's preference for a monarchy over a republic, though the separation was peaceful, yet the 20th century was not so kind. The Second World War has shown a country which was united in resistance to the Nazis, and the brilliant use of the commercial fleet that really helped the workload of the Allies in this period. So how was the war effective in establishing the national identity? I think especially the difference that happened, that Sweden was not occupied, Sweden remained neutral. We know, of course, Sweden was forced to accept the free passage of the German forces which was really very not that sweet. So do you think that World War II, with all its horrible effect on Norway and the disasters that happened, has established the national identity of Norwegians of today?
Yes, I think it reinforced the national identity. After 1905, our foreign policy back then was to not have a foreign policy. That was our motto. Our policy was to fly low under the radar, even though they didn't have radars back then. But but to not stick out, to be neutral, to not take any positions in any of the many wars or conflicts or tensions on the continent, but also to have excellent relations with Great Britain, which was still the imperial power that ruled the Atlantic. So by electing a Danish prince to become the Norwegian king, King Håkon VII, and he had a British or English wife, a queen. We thought that we could sort of maneuver in a way to secure good relations with Denmark and also more importantly Britain, that Britain would defend our neutrality. So we were neutral
in World War One.
We were neutral in World War One. Our merchant fleet was very active. A lot of them were sunk by German ships, but they served, to be frank, both sides as a neutral fleet. But then our defense was built down and almost non-existent in 1940. And even though the Second World War was starting to brew, and with Nazi Germany growing, and we thought that we could still remain neutral until Germany attacked Norway. They thought or anticipated that Britain or France would maybe occupy Norway first as a preemptive strike in order to prevent Hitler from gaining the long coastline of Norway that would dominate the Atlantic. So when we were occupied by the Germans, that really, I think, dispelled any notion that we could continue to be neutral after the war. But during the war, as being a Nordic population, the Nazi Germany saw in Norway as almost an equal population, so they fared very lightly and very gently with the Norwegians, as opposed to how they fared in Eastern Europe, with the massacres and the pogroms and the Holocausts. But despite this, there was a very strong national identity and a strong independence. And the king Håkon VII, was really a proponent of that independence, because Germany, at several points when they invaded Norway, presented Norway with an ultimatum: give up, or we will bomb your cities, your populations. We will capture your royal family and your government. And the king said, no, I refuse. And then the government, they could make their own decisions, but they were influenced by this very strong king. So they refused as well. They fled. And they were presented with this ultimatum when they were really, fleeing under heavy bombardment. And the king still said, no, I refuse to submit myself to the German occupation. So
and he went to exile in England.
So the king and the government, with the whole, with all our gold, was smuggled over to England, and they continued the resistance there. And then eventually there was more and more resistance to the German occupation. And there was a Norwegian politician who took over power or wanted to take over power in Norway, called Vidkun Quisling. Today, Quisling is another word for traitor in English language. But anyway, so the people resisted, and then after the war in 1949, we were thinking, should we enter a Nordic alliance, together with Denmark and Sweden? But Sweden, they were adamant that they wanted to remain neutral. For us, the history of occupation was, we needed an alliance, and with the Soviets, even though the Soviets did liberate the northern part of Norway and withdrew, but they
obeyed the Yalta Convention, right?
They obeyed the Yalta Convention, but so anyway, the conclusion that we drew then was that we could not continue without being in a strong alliance. So we were among the founding nations of the NATO alliance, with the United States as its most important power.
This remains very interesting because Norway then started to have a more or less a stable economy built on fishing and other maritime activities.
And a lot of industry.
Yes, a lot of industry. But there was a key point or a key movement that really has shown the world what Norwegians are made of. The resilience and the persistence and the perseverance to find out that they have a rich source of petroleum and to make a decision, a very faithful decision, not to use this money for this generation or even the generation after, to the further generations out. Tell us about this, because this has never happened, I believe, in any other country than Norway, to take such a very liberal socialist move, not to confiscate the money or say let's enjoy the money now, we don't care about our grandchildren. You decided a different decision than any other country in the world.
Well,
tell us about petroleum industry.
Yes, okay. I just want to say that there are two slightly myths about Norway.
Yes.
The first one is that Norway was poor before we struck oil. We were not.
Of course.
And in 1965, so let's say 5 years before the first oil was found and extracted, I think we were in 4th or 5th place in Europe in terms of living standards.
Yes.
So Norway was quite an industrialized and prosperous country, also because we're blessed with a lot of renewable energy, hydropower. I mean, we have a lot of rain, which we're not always so happy about, in our daily lives. But it really always provided us with a lot of water reservoirs in our lakes and our rivers. We have a lot of waterfalls. So these waterfalls and rivers were driving the industry all over Norway. Even in even in Oslo, where we have a big river dividing the city in two, the first industry was along that river. So we had free power, free electricity for almost 100 years, So we were blessed with that, and we had a very strong industry. So when we struck oil, we were already doing quite well. But yes, you're right. We did, after we had paid down our debts, and we started having a surplus in our budgets, which I think we're very fortunate to have. We decided to put all oil and gas revenues into our sovereign wealth fund. So all revenues, which are still to this day quite substantial, are put directly into the sovereign wealth fund. But we do use 2 to 3% of that fund, of what the surplus of the sovereign wealth fund, into our state budgets, which is almost a fourth of our state budget. So we still these oil and gas revenues, they still go into our state budgets, although indirectly through the sovereign wealth fund. So we still rely on oil and gas a lot. But you're right. The main idea is to save these revenues for the future, and for especially to pay pensions for future generations. But again, we have quite a diversified industry, so we're not entirely reliant on oil and gas.
This makes it a very interesting thing, because this helped, of course, the industry, not just the oil and gas, has ranked Norway first in the World Happiness Report for 2017, and currently ranks first on the OECD Better Life Index, the Index of Public Integrity, the Freedom Index, and the Democracy Index. Norway also has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. How is that possible, sir? I mean, it's not just happiness. Definitely there is another secret.
No, and we know now today the Finns are happier than we are. I think we're a small country. We're a population of 5 million. So it's the conditions are small. We have a very strong social democratic identity. I think humility and community is a very strong trait of Norwegian society. We've had very strong social democratic governments up until the 1980s, and still with the conservative parties today, that is still a strong element in the policies. So the sense of community. I think what we always refer to when we discuss these things in Norway is that there's a very high level of trust in Norway. So people trust the government, people trust the media, people trust the police, they trust the judicial system, people trust each other. And people will probably tell you that things were a lot better 20 years ago or 50 years ago. People were much more helping each other in the neighborhoods than they are today, and that level of trust is always, we cannot take it for granted, and there are so many things that are challenging that level of trust. But I think we'll still have that trust. So I think that accounts for some parts of the explanation why there is so little crime, so little violence, why there's a fairly high rate of participation in democratic elections, more than 60%, and why we have a well-functioning political system.
Well, this really makes an interesting explanation of the happiness scale. But let's talk, before we talk about Egyptian-Norwegian relations, let's talk about the two most important pillars of an advance in a society. And this is, of course, the education and the healthcare. And how far is the education going in Norway? It's the 12-year compulsory schooling, or how?
So compulsory school is 10 years.
10 years.
It used to be 9. They added an extra year. And then you can build on that by adding 3 years of what one would say in the United States, the senior high school, which is compulsory in order to advance to universities. But schools are free of charge. Universities are essentially free. I mean, there are private schools. Certain business schools are private and quite expensive, but you can get a very good education in any kind of field for free in Norway. And there are alternatives also to the public school, private schools for religious minorities, or if you want to have a sort of a Christian education,
like Jesuits or things like that. You mean,
yes,
right? Yeah, more or less.
So there are alternatives, but the main educational system is public and free. The same goes for the health sector; that is also public and free. You pay a sort of a very small fee for seeing your doctor, but the main part of the bill goes directly to the state. We pay quite a lot of taxes. Between 30 and 40% taxes on our income. So that goes back to that is the health sector and the public sector in general is not all funded by the oil and gas revenues. It's funded by taxes by Norwegian taxpayers, on revenues. So, but then if your next question is how is the education sector and health sector faring in Norway, given that we have all these resources? Well, it's not doing that great, actually. I mean, the education sector, Finland scores way higher on all.
This is what I was just going to ask.
All kinds of tests,
yes.
proficiency tests. And the health sector, well, we have everything is for free, but then we also have very long lines for patients to wait in order to get their treatment. And I mean, this is a constant dilemma and a discussion. How is it so? We have all these resources, and we keep pouring, revenues from the sovereign wealth fund also into the public sector. So I guess it's all these revenues are a blessing, but and they're not. It's not a curse like the Dutch disease, or it's not a curse like it has been elsewhere. It's been handled quite professionally and mindfully, but I think it's still an issue of making political priorities, and then there's also a question of how much space do we give to private initiatives. As you may know, being a doctor yourself, private clinics take people away from the public sector.
Mm-hmm.
Same with private schools. So if you offer sort of a professional private alternative to the public school being free, but it has to accommodate everyone, whereas you have clinics or school systems for the privileged, then that creates certain tensions. Also, we do not want to deprive people of this choice. So there's this balance that is very difficult to strike. But all in all, I would say that we have a very good health sector. Education sector could be better, but it's still very good. It gives you a very solid foundation. Obviously, it's not. I mean, since it's open for everyone and it's made for everyone, not everyone, like individual, will maybe not find that the public school sector, education sector, caters to their needs if they're particularly talented or not. So there's always that difficult balance. But all in all, I think we're in a pretty good place. But we can always do better.
Definitely. Well, we're still having His Excellency Ambassador Eric Husem, the Ambassador of Norway to Cairo, and we're coming right after the break. Stay tuned with us. So, still coming from Studio 3, my name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is still at the control, and we're having with us a very, really distinguished diplomat, His Excellency Ambassador Eric Husem, the Ambassador of Norway to Egypt. And let's talk about the Egyptian-Norwegian relations. I know you are following the footsteps of a lot of distinguished Norwegian ambassadors who came and served in Egypt and definitely have made a bridge of friendship and cooperation that has been for quite a long time. Since when Egypt has relations with Norway, almost?
So we established diplomatic relations in 1936. So this year we mark 90 years of diplomatic relations. How far do they go back? I don't know. We know for a fact, we think, until we discover otherwise, that the Vikings never set foot in Egypt. They were roaming and raiding the Mediterranean, certainly the Eastern Mediterranean, Constantinople, and the Holy Lands and Sicily, but never Egypt. The first recorded exchange between Norway and Egypt was in the 1300s, when the Norwegian king sent 3 falcons to the Sultan of Cairo. The falcons were from Greenland, by the way. But I think that's the first recorded exchange.
And what was the name of the Sultan? Do you remember, sir?
Yes, it was King. So it was King Magnus Ericsson, who sent Sultan of Cairo. I forget the name. I forget the Egyptian name, but your listeners can look it up.
Oh, very good. That's interesting.
But then, yes, so we've had diplomatic relations for 90 years. We've had Norwegian businesses here longer than that. We have a Norwegian business called Lett, which is a service company in the Suez Canal. They've been here for a little bit more than 100 years. The famous Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen was here for the opening of the canal, the Suez Canal, but then as part of a Swedish-Norwegian delegation, because we were in union with Sweden back then, as you remember. So yes, so 90 years of diplomatic relations. Of course, Egypt has always been and is still a very prominent state in the region. So it's natural for us. It was always natural for us to have a very close cooperation. Of course, with the Oslo process and the conflicts, before Norway was. Let me back up a little bit. After World War II, Norway had very close relations with Israel. Our political class, some of them spent years in concentration camps, but they were also from the Labour Party, socialists, and they had very close ties with the socialists in Israel. And at some point, Norway was considered, Israel's best friend. So we always. And also a very strong defender and proponent of the UN. We had the first UN Secretary General, Trygve Lie. So we participated in many of these early peacekeeping operations, for instance, in Gaza. We had the first two force commanders of the MFO in Sinai, overlooking the Camp David Accords. So Norway has always been involved, in the region, especially after World War II. And then, you probably know that the Oslo Accords started with, were signed in '93, and we had two prominent diplomats sort of leading that process. But it was actually started by a counselor at the embassy in Cairo who traveled to Beirut in secret to meet with Arafat. Because our foreign minister wanted to check where the PLO were standing and if there were any chances of, trying to find to negotiate or to facilitate negotiations rather. So he traveled in secret. He pretended to be a cameraman together with the Norwegian Broadcasting Service that visited the Palestinian refugee camps, and in that way he came into contact with Arafat and then sort of laid the ground for what later became the Oslo process, but he was based here in Cairo. And then since then, of course, after the Oslo Accords, Norway has had very close ties with all Arab states in the region, including with Israel, in order to make sure that the Oslo process led to its natural goal, Palestinian state. And in that respect, we have had very close relationship and cooperation with Egypt, together with Jordan and Saudi Arabia and other countries. So I think that working relationship has just increased and deepened and strengthened over time. And as you probably know, our relations with Israel have strained over time, also because I think the population in Norway turned from being extremely pro-Israel to being pro-Palestinian, and I think that came with Norway's participation in the UNIFIL in South Lebanon, where they witnessed firsthand the plight of the Palestinians, but also the Lebanese, and also witnessed the Israeli invasion. So I think that really turned the public mood and the public opinion to becoming much more pro-Palestinian, which I think is you see very strongly today. And as you know, also Norway recognized the state of Palestine. Well, it was 2 years ago now, I think, if I remember correctly. So we still have a very close coordination and cooperation with the government of Egypt on this issue in particular, Palestine. I think we're very much aligned, but also on Sudan, on other regional issues. I think we are so to speak entirely aligned on all these issues. And also on defending the multilateral system, the UN, the role of the UN, rules-based order, international law. We work very closely with our Egyptian partners in multilateral settings. We don't agree on everything, obviously, but I think on the sort of a principal tenets, defending a rules-based order, where international law actually means something. I think we're completely aligned. So I think that sort of forms the basis of our bilateral relation. And then, of course, as I referred to earlier, we've had Norwegian businesses, engaged in Egypt over time, and then I think now there are more and more.
So, in what are the prospects of investment, or the types of investment that Norwegian or business having in Egypt?
So, first and foremost, as you know, we, in addition to exporting oil and gas, and we do sell just a little bit of liquefied gas to Egypt, although I think 95 or 97% of our oil exports go to Europe. But we also are a huge exporter of fish, so we export salmon and herring and mackerel to Egyptian kitchen tables.
Yes.
And we're also a big shipping nation, so we have a lot of Norwegian ships and companies operating in Egyptian ports and through the Suez Canal, both as service providers, but also we have lots of Norwegian ships going back and forth in the Red Sea. We have quite a few service providers in the oil industry also working in the Egyptian oil and gas sector. Then, of course, we have the Norwegian paints company Jotun with the penguin, which also is 100 years old this year and celebrates 40 years in Egypt. I think it's become a sort of almost a household brand, and
yes,
I think many Egyptians and also in the region, almost take it as a national company or a local company. But it's has had a huge success. And then lately, and then there's Yara with the that produces nitrogen and fertilizer. Also a product of early industrialization. And the cheap renewable energy that we had, direct to
fertilizers.
Fertilizers, yes. I think one of the largest fertilizer companies in the world, Yara, with the Viking ship logo. And then in the last 10 years, we've had a Norwegian company called Scatec that has gradually introduced itself to the Egyptian market, delivering solar energy. Which, of course, Egypt is particularly adapted, or has particularly good potential because of all the open spaces and all the free sun that you have that we don't have in Norway. So they opened the Benban solar park in I think that's
in Aswan.
On Aswan, that's right. So that was one of Africa's largest back then. In 2019, they're opening this month the obelisk in Kenya, which will produce one over gigawatt power, and also has battery storage, and they have many other projects in the pipeline. And I think that's your president has a very ambitious. Your government has a very ambitious renewable strategy. Where I think Norwegian companies fit perfectly. So
our president is encouraging this field of cooperation, especially in the solar energy cooperation.
And wind and
as well
all kinds of renewables. And we, as I said, we have a lot of renewable in Norway, which is hydropower, but we still haven't quite managed to wean off oil and gas and really develop solar and wind power in Norway, which we are trying to do. But then markets like Egypt and the rest of Africa, but also other parts of the world, is a very good ground for Norwegian companies to bring their skills and technology and to put them in place there.
And I think the encouragement that President Sisi is doing in the field of whether this was the improvement of the infrastructure or the improvement or the fact of the open arms policy for investment in Egypt, especially in the Suez Canal economic zone. So do you see that there will be more cooperation for Norwegian companies to invest using the experienced Egyptian available workers, and at the same time the will of the government and the will of the president to share this with you?
Absolutely. I see. I see the Egyptian government trying to attract as much foreign investments as possible, with as you say, an open arm policy. We are in touch with a lot of Norwegian companies that see Egypt as a growth market, as a possible gateway to the rest of the continent. Also geographically well placed. North Africa, Middle East, Africa, Mediterranean. So it's sort of in the crossroads. So, and a lot of potential in many sectors. We have a couple of companies that are looking into waste management and sludge management, for instance, and a lot of the, in the renewables and the green energy sector, I guess. There is a lot of potential, and a lot of Norwegian companies that are looking to Egypt. So they look at Scatec, and they look at Yara, and they look at Jotun, and they think if they can succeed, then we can succeed. So, but what I tell ministers that I meet with and others is that this economic policy that the Egyptian government is pursuing is very well, that they should continue. Following the advice of the IMF of restructuring and allowing for the private sector to prosper, and that Norwegian businesses are following those developments very closely. They're,
and of course, with the improvement of the infrastructure, it has affected really the sector of tourism. And definitely, you were just telling me before going on air how the Norwegian tourists, who are almost 30 to 35,000 Norwegian tourists who visit Egypt regularly, and they go for Hurghada, especially in the more or less in autumn and winter, to enjoy the sun, Hurghada and the Red Sea resorts. Now they are, with the advance of the improvement of the infrastructure and the roads and the opening up of the Grand Museum, they are adding more touristic nights to see this part of the country that usually they didn't frequent much, right, sir?
Yes, I think that's we haven't seen the latest figures yet. So but anecdotal evidence suggests that yes, there is a growing interest among Norwegian tourists to see Cairo, to visit the pyramids. The Grand Egyptian Museum obviously has increased the interest. Also the attraction, but also the doing Nile cruises. I mean, we've always had Norwegian tourists coming to Cairo to do these things, but I think with the opening of the Gem, that has really, the interest has increased, and I think we will see a lot more tourists coming to explore the history, the culture, and to not just make Cairo a one night stay in order to see the pyramids and then fly off, but then to the Red Sea, but to rather to spend more time, because there is, and I can attest to that, there is so much to explore and to see.
Yes, we have shared some tours actually
in Cairo. Yes.
So just before we leave, I think you see that both our leaderships, whether the President Sisi or your leadership, have shared a lot of common thoughts, not only in politics but in economics, and of course in the field of in other fields of cooperation. You will definitely, in your tenure, you will increase these prospects of cooperation, right, sir?
Absolutely, that's my job. Yes.
And before we end the program, I know that you are also an avid visitor of a lot of Egyptian treasures, whether these are in Cairo or in Upper Egypt or else. So you had the chance to see some of Cairo, right?
Oh yes. I've as you know, I joined some of the walks that we have with some of my diplomatic colleagues and others around all Cairo. So I've seen a lot of places that is both open and closed to the general public, which is amazing. So I've seen, a lot of the old architecture and old history of Cairo. Obviously, I've been out to the Giza pyramids, but also to the Saqqara pyramids. And then I've had the opportunity, even though I've only been here for less than a year, I've been to Aswan and Luxor and to Alexandria 3 times, and to Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada, and many places.
So I wish that you continue on your endeavors, if we use the expression.
I have another 3 years, so I plan to crisscross the country as much as possible.
Wishing you the best. Well, before we leave, we'd like to thank very much His Excellency Ambassador Eric Husem, the Ambassador of Norway to Egypt. You've been kind enough to share with us your experience in Egypt, the history of your beautiful country, and please promise us before you leave that you'll come back again to tell us more about other successful stories about Norway in Egypt and the cooperation in different fields, sir.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank
you for having me.
Thank you, sir. And with this, we come to the end of our program, The World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad was at the control. We promise you will come back the same time, same station next week. Stay tuned always to Radio Cairo and enjoy your weekend.